All right, another one of many meetings. Last night ended abruptly. We wish it would have ended better, but it didn't. The governor made what we would have considered an offer, not a big offer in our mind, but it's still an offer. And the House Democrats felt like they needed to make a different offer, and so it's a little bit frustrating for us because we're looking for one offer from the two, but that's okay. That's the nature of what we're doing. We came back with what we thought was a measured counter offer. They didn't think so, and so we kind of left abruptly. And so today we said, well, let's just circle back. Let's get back together. Let's get back on the same page of working towards getting this done. So we're just going to take a little bit of time to do that, to make sure of the next step. I think they would prefer that we made the next offer. We're hoping that they make the next offer. Our issue is we want them to make movement on the large tax increases across many different areas. Over a 4-year period, it was $12 billion. We're saying, show us that is not too high. I mean, we feel like that is way, way high as far as tax increases on Minnesotans. And so that's what we're waiting for, but we all are going to take some time to decide what is the next best step. So with that, I'm still optimistic. I've been through this before. I think we'll get it done, but stay tuned.
Isn't the fact that the House and the governor have come to the same number progress? Because I thought you said you only wanted one position to negotiate.
Yeah. So the question is, isn't it progress that the House and governor came to the same number? Yes, except the House asked us to reduce spending, increase spending significantly more than the governor did. And so that's where as the only Republican in leadership here, I'm not going to negotiate twice. And so we'll have to navigate through that. I believe we'll figure it out, but that was one example of why we're not going to do it that way, where the governor makes us one offer and says we got to go down a certain amount, and then we immediately get another offer from the House that says they're going to go down a number, but we have to go down farther. That's just not, I think, how it will work. It's sort of like when Governor Dayton made Speaker Dowd and myself work it out. It's not easy that way, but that's the way I think it works if you want to get finished.
Mr. Leader, how long do you think you're going to need to kind of step back from this before you actually get?
Well, we're way ahead of schedule. At the very latest, I think all of us should get done by next Wednesday and actually agreeing. So anything before that is fine. But I think we're going to just take a deeper look at where our differences are between the two or three sides in this case. And move forward when it seems right, but we still are way ahead of schedule. The fact that we actually had some offers back and forth this early is a good sign. The fact that the governor and the speaker and myself are meeting again, that we are talking, trying to work through understanding each other's different points of view in a respectful manner is very positive. I still think we're in a good place. Hopefully by next Wednesday or earlier. I hope it's not Friday or later.
When do you meet again?
We haven't scheduled something, but again, we were at the very latest, the schedule would be Sunday night. We're all going to be on the boat Saturday, and if we have something earlier than that, then we'll schedule another meeting. So, thank you.
So, from my perspective, we really don't have anything to talk about until the Senate makes a real counteroffer. The governor made a substantial move in their direction. The House made an even more substantial move, and the Senate countered with 0. So we have time in the boat scheduled, and we have another negotiating session scheduled on Sunday. I told Senator Gazelka I will drop whatever I'm doing between now and Sunday at 6 if they have a real counteroffer, and we can pick up negotiations again. But until there's a real counteroffer, there's nothing to talk about. The Senate budget hurts Minnesotans. It would devastate the Health and Human Services area. It would cause massive cuts across the state in our school districts that would drive up property taxes or force teacher layoffs. What they're proposing in many areas of their budget, the transportation number is wholly inadequate. Again, would provide tremendous pressure on the property tax to pave city streets and county roads. And so we are not in a position to go down to a budget that would devastate Minnesotans and drive up their property taxes. Sunday at 6. Unless they can cough up a real offer sooner than that, which, it's in the interest of Minnesotans and the legislature for them to put a real offer on the table before then, because we really should be trying to do this in daylight in an orderly fashion, and being stubborn and intransigent doesn't help the process.
Just to let you know, we picked back things up from last night. Certainly from the administration's perspective, that I'm fighting for a budget that I believe does those things Minnesotans asked for in a quality of life here, which is world-class education system, a healthcare system certainly predicated on the idea that everybody gets coverage that's underpinned by the provider tax, the Healthcare Access Fund, and making smart investments that give our state the opportunity to grow. With that being said, I opened with an initial offer that I spent some time today clarifying, both with the House and the Senate leadership. To be very clear, we took $200 million of revenue off of our proposal, and that is not an easy thing in terms of those are lost investments that we could make. Those are choices that need to be made that when we built the budget were factored into it, whether those be in areas relating to housing or education or wherever it may be. We have to start thinking about that. So my message today was clear, and I know the Senate has a little different perspective on that, but where I offered to make a significant change in the area that they said was most troublesome for them, their offer back to me was to shift and do nothing. And so I don't view that as a meaningful counteroffer, so we're still waiting for that. I think that that feeling is exacerbated in the House, where the House moves significant revenues away from and towards finding a compromise with the Senate. So that's where we stand today. Still fighting for that budget that I believe makes Minnesota most competitive, that holds up our responsibility to educate our children and take care of our people, and has a responsibility to care for the infrastructure that was given to us, whether that be roads, bridges, transit, or water infrastructure, and having an honest budget that pays for those. So please, any questions?
So speak up there when the majority leader says we need to back away from those tax increases, which he says others.
Well, this is a state that invests in things that make a difference. When we invest in early childhood education, like pre-K, we get a 12-to-1 return on that. For example, in the Senate budget, where they eliminate that, we know that that is going to add costs both on the front end to children in education and potentially on the back end in social services and corrections that could be alleviated on the front end. So this idea, whether it's paying taxes to pay our soldiers or our firefighters or our police or to educate our children, there's a cost you pay in a society. The debate has always been, what type of state do you want to live in? And we have created a budget that reflects the values of Minnesota. As I said again, I'm not looking to craft a Mississippi budget, and with their concerns being heard, my first offer to them was to look at our budget under a fine-tooth comb and come back to them with a significant reduction in revenues, and to try and reprioritize our budget, and to have a counteroffer be zero and no changes is not a serious counteroffer. So I hear the majority leader on this, but Minnesotans have always known you get what you pay for, and the type of state that you're looking for. There is no concrete plan to pay for these needs. Now, I will reiterate once again, they put out a budget that they're unwilling to move on. The committee chairs in education, for example, said in February, I like the governor's numbers, I like the budget on the funding formula, and then said later that we know the Senate numbers are going to come up. So I would suggest a move towards making real change, and maybe they have to actually look at some revenues and then turn around and invest that in education, which they know they need to do. It's simply not good enough to take and put pain into one place by cutting children off of health care or cutting people off of dental services, and then try and say that that's a sacrifice, we'll put a little bit of money back into education. That's not a real offer.
Governor, listen, the Democratic Majority Leader said this morning, Ryan Winkler said this morning, they don't compromise. I don't see how this is going to get done. I mean, it sounds like you've gotten nowhere in the past 20
No, I wouldn't characterize it that way at all. I think we're certainly having a lot of long and deep philosophical discussions about our position. We are going back through and explaining the principles that got us to that point. An offer was made, and again, I think to characterize it as nothing, that 10% of the entire budget that we worked 4 months on I was willing in the original offer to make that concession so they would move towards us, with the idea that we are going to protect those things that are most important to Minnesotans, the education of their children, the health care, especially for those that need it most, and real investments in community like broadband that we know need to be out there. So I think there's reasons to be optimistic. I just need to wait for a serious counteroffer. When you give us an offer that your own chairs say is grossly inadequate to do what it needs to do, that's not a real offer. So this is the time to start being serious. It's the time to not be posturing. I think that's exactly what's going on. So I remain hopeful.
Governor said that the next meeting isn't until Sunday night. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think, and again, I think those things change. They're looking at, certainly we have the fishing opener this week. I will be in Albert Lee starting Thursday night, but as I said, I'm available 24/7. We'll be down there Friday, and then of course we'll all be together Saturday morning. It's a Mother's Day weekend, and those things are playing in. I am glad we started early so that we're not having this conversation next Sunday. With that being said, we'll see how that plays out. The conference committees are still meeting. I, again, am going to reiterate that the Senate had the gavel. They had an opportunity to have a conference committee with experts testifying on transportation funding. Instead of doing that, they canceled that. And it says to me, because it's much easier to say there's way too much in the governor's budget and then not to tell you that they are going to dramatically underfund our transportation system to the point of putting us at risk. So we'll see what happens after that.
Governor, we've known since January, or at least February, that you wanted the gas tax increase, you want the health care provider tax to stay, and you've known the other side has said no, no, no all along. One side or the other has to cave in. It's the only way I see anything happening there. How do you view this? I don't see them giving any one penny on, let's say, a gas tax.
Yeah, I don't see them giving anything either, and I think that's unfortunate because, again, the alternative to this is not winning. If there's a political win, it is crumbling roads, bridges, and transportation system. I've laid out a very comprehensive plan. Theirs is the status quo. Again, it's not me saying we're grossly and inadequately funded. It's civil engineers that know what's there. So, again, I don't have to get to the specifics on this, but just to be clear, the frame here is this, that my first offer was to reduce revenues. So at the end of the day, when I put that spending bill on the table, the revenues have to be there to pay for it. I've already said I was reducing those revenues down, which means the spending levels are going to do less. They can interpret that however they want, but the reality of it is I have made that move in that direction. I expected a counteroffer that came somewhat in that direction. I think that's what we're waiting for.
Will you give in?
So I can't negotiate with myself at this time. I got to get again, that's what I've done. I need a counteroffer. I'm not just talking about shifts that went in, but I can tell you this, that my principles have not changed. I was elected to do the job that Minnesotans sent me here to do, which is to help work together to craft budgets that reflect their values, in which they said loud and clear, educate our children in a smart way, make sure our healthcare system's the best in the world, and then make sure these prosperity pieces, whether it be transit or whether it be investments in broadband or whether it be the University of Minnesota, are adequately funded, and do that by being honest about paying for it on the front end and tell us what that looks like. And so I still stand in front of you, prepared to do what's necessary to move Minnesota forward. I have said again, some of my red lines would be, I will not put Minnesota's health at risk when experts from 141 hospitals, 155 organizations supporting people with disabilities, to Catholic charities, to physician organizations that tell me if you don't renew the provider tax, you will seriously jeopardize the health of Minnesotans and undermine our system for all who are taking part. So I'm willing to work with them. I'm willing to hear it, but I'm waiting for that real offer. When we get it, we'll come right back at it. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.